The Survival Guide to Life.
Hey guys, we got another episode of the Survival Guide to Life, and this week we have our guest, Star Hansen. Now, Star is a professional organizer. If you're not too familiar what that is, I think Star could describe that and herself best. So, really quick, Star, just for everyone who's listening in, could you just tell us a little about you and some of the accomplishments you've achieved?
Absolutely. Well, as you said, professional organizer, I think the world knows professional organizers as people who come in and help organize the clutter in your house, get things into good shape. I am a little bit like the anti-organizer. So I am very unique in the fact that instead of focusing on boxes and labels and bins and systems, I look at people's unique needs and what is causing the clutter to continue to show up over and over again, because the organizing industry is a $2 billion industry and growing. So if boxes and labels and bins were going to solve the problem, we wouldn't be growing that industry. We would be shrinking that industry. So I have been doing this work for over 2 decades, and I have been, I have a TEDx talk. I've been highlighted on over 30 television shows. I have a new book that just came out called Why the F Am I Still Not Organized? And that is exactly what I do. I help people figure out why in the F they are still not organized.
So, in that regard, Star, it's really cool, but so many different things just popped up in my head while you were telling us about yourself. And one was that what type of organization were you in, or was it more towards single people, or was it organizations or corporations, maybe their warehouses that needed organization?
I have done it all. In 20 years, I have done it all. I've done, warehouses for businesses. I've done productivity for people. I've helped with organizational coaching, with families, with businesses, with individuals, couples, you name it. And I have seen it all in the last 20 years when it comes to clutter and organization.
So, when you say you've seen it all, what are some of the things that sort of speak out to you the most, like when you said that, some of the memories?
I think, it's funny. When I started my business, I always said, anyone can learn how to organize a space. But what you're really dealing with when it comes to being a professional organizer is personalities. You're dealing with people's trauma history. You're dealing with their relationships to each other if they live in a home with someone else. You are dealing with the emotional side of people, because what makes clutter difficult is not categories or solutions or systems. What makes organizing complicated are the big feelings that are layered in our clutter. And the fact that a lot of our systems in this society are not built for, some people's brains. Like if you have a neurotypical brain, you may do great with some of the systems that are out there, but if you have a neurodivergent brain, maybe some ADHD or, other, kind of patterns, you may really struggle to find the systems that work for you. So when I said that, I'm kind of flashing back to individuals that I've worked with over the years and just watching them figure out what they need in order to thrive, instead of doing what society says they should do, or what this show said that they should do, or what this book said. Watching people figure out what they need from their clutter and what they need from themselves in order to not have the clutter continue to show up over and over again.
So when you say that, and like with the clients you've dealt with, and like their overburdens of responsibility, stuffs, ideas, communications, commitment, could you share some like common challenges, what they faced, and like your approaches to help them during those challenges?
Absolutely. Well, the thing that I focus on mostly is people who have recurrences of clutter. So imagine that pile of mail that just keeps building up on your kitchen counter, or the stack of books and paperwork and pill bottles that continue to stack next to your bed on the side table, or the jumble of wires in your office that you don't feel like you can ever part with because they might be really important someday, even though you haven't touched them in a decade. So that's what I kind of notice with people now. How my approach is different from a lot of organizers out there is I, again, am less interested in the systems and more interested in the why. So why do you have an emotional reaction to releasing cables that you haven't touched in 2 decades or a decade? Why is it that people, feel anxiety when they go to organize their paperwork? And so what I do is I help people figure out how the clutter is serving them, how they're using the clutter. So one of the ways that I've seen this done is I had a client that I was organizing his office with him. And I would come in and we'd spend a long day organizing together, and I'd leave and it would look great. And then it would be cluttered again in 2 weeks, and I'd have to come back and we would do it over and over again. And what we noticed after a few bouts of doing this, we discovered that what he was using his clutter for was protection. He had had a break-in in his home, and the clutter made him feel safe, as though if there was another break-in, burglars wouldn't be able to find his valuables, or it would be much more difficult. So there was a sense of safety with his clutter that really made him feel like parting with the clutter was terrifying. And so once we named that, we were able to create a special safe place for his valuables. And once he did that and he really acknowledged what was going on, the clutter didn't keep recurring because he didn't have a need for it anymore. And so that's what I'm really doing, is I'm helping people figure out the need that their clutter is serving them, and then helping them get that need met without the clutter. Once we do that, the clutter is not necessary and it can just fade away.
So when you say that, it made me think about something else that you said, and that was in how listening to your clutter can transform your life. What did you mean by that exactly?
Yeah, so I feel like our clutter is always talking to us. Our clutter tends to be an external demonstration of our internal world. So whatever you're feeling and whatever you're experiencing tends to show itself through our physical spaces and our stuff. And so when we are experiencing turmoil inside of ourselves, oftentimes our physical spaces show signs of that turmoil. And when we're doing really well, sometimes our physical spaces show signs of that joy and that bliss. And so there really is an alignment between our spaces and our mental state.
So, as you talk about this, I really see your, mastery or expertise in this field. Is this something that started in a young age? Or did you develop this later on?
It was mostly developed later on, but I think it was always there. I think I always had a little bit of insight. The first, space I ever really organized outside of just tidying my room was when my grandfather passed away. And I talk about this in my book that, when the family was preparing for his funeral, I had made the decision that I would go and start organizing his room. And it was so interesting because as I was organizing his room, this was a man who I barely knew when he was alive. We lived in different cities and I was younger. And so I really didn't get to know him. And through organizing his spaces, I learned so much about that man. I learned what his values were. I learned what he, really wanted to spend his time doing, how his brain worked just from looking at his stuff. And so that was when I was, in high school. And it's been so interesting to see how that was born into a career less than 10 years later, where the minute I started organizing with people, I instantly saw that there was something bigger going on, that it wasn't just about boxes and labels. And it became this really interesting exploration, and it's just continued to grow. I mean, I work with people one-on-one. I have an online membership that I work with people. And it's so fascinating to see how clutter really is so rarely accidental. It's so rarely meaningless. It's so often a pattern of something much bigger going on.
And what you said, how you learned so much from your grandfather in organizing his room, I'm sure you learned so much of all your clients from all the clutter that you've cleaned and organized. From that, what can you take is some factors in organization and someone's nature or characteristics or the way their brain works?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's, we all have patterns of doing life. We just don't see them because they're so second nature to us. And so I always say, I don't care how, cluttered your house is. There's somewhere in your house that is not cluttered, somewhere that is organized and that you have a great deal of care for. Even if, I've seen this in hoarded houses, even where there's just tiny goat trails between rooms, but then there will be one command center where the person has their paperwork or their lounge chair, whatever it is. There's always somewhere that we value. And kind of beyond that, I experience that every room in our house connects to an area of our life. So to me, wherever your house is disorganized or super organized, that tells me what part of your life is really successful for you or where you're really struggling. And the clutter tends to be where we're having more unresolved issues and maybe more struggling. And the super organized space shows where we're really, firing on all cylinders.
It's interesting you say that. Sometimes just in my own life, when I feel like a little scattered brained or like I kind of lose track where I'm going, I kind of just clean up and just clean and organize my room or everything or my place. And then right after, I just instantly feel like way different and like feel more mythological and everything's just way different.
Yes. Oh my gosh. It's that magical dopamine hit. We get this wonderful flood of dopamine when we start organizing and categorizing and creating systems. It's so good for our brain. And I have to say, with the way the world has felt the last few years, with the amount of violence and chaos and, heartbreak and overwhelm, organizing can be a really healing activity. In a world where we don't have a lot of control and we're seeing atrocious injustices, it can feel so empowering to feel like there is some corner of the world where we can have a positive impact. And I always tell my clients, don't overlook the power of that, because your brain doesn't know the difference between you finishing an ultra marathon and you organizing your sock drawer. Like, your brain perceives both of those as success. So you having a moment where you feel like you need to kind of reclaim some of your power, it can be so beneficial to do these small organizing projects that give us that wonderful hit of dopamine, give us that powerful feeling of accomplishment, especially in a world that feels so stressful and overwhelming.
Yeah, so I guess what I got from that is that really to celebrate your little wins and try to make progress and keep everything recorded, so you can see your progress. So I think the way your brain works, right, as you see that you're checking things off and doing things, that the more dopamine or the better you feel.
Yeah, well, and also it's, yes, you want to keep track of it, but also it's so powerful to give ourselves these projects. It's not like, oh, I happened to get this done today, but to say, I feel totally stressed by the state of the world. I need some power back. I'm going to organize this drawer in my kitchen. And doing that will give you a sense of empowerment. And again, we're not solving world peace or, like world hunger, but we are allowing ourselves to feel a state of empowerment in a very disempowering time. And so it can be a really wonderful trick we can use on ourselves to feel a sense of strength and empowerment.
So another question that I had was like, apart from anything tangible, were there any clients that had like reached out to you and said, I just have clutter in my life, or I just need you to help organize my life?
Oh, yeah, that's what they always call. No one, especially for the first, 16 years, no one was saying there's something bigger going on. They were calling and saying, my house is a mess. Please come and help me. And I would meet them and instantly know what was really happening. I would meet them, look at where their clutter was, look at the state of life that they were experiencing after talking to them. And then I would understand the assignment, right? I understood the assignment, but they just wanted to get organized. And my job as the kind of organizer that I am is to get them organized, but in the process of getting them organized, to help them understand why the clutter has been there for as long as it has, and the types of skills and education and tools that they need in order to live without the clutter. And so I have a twofold job of making sure that they have the tools and emotional bandwidth to live without the clutter, as well as helping them move the clutter out of their homes and lives.
So, being featured on like several TV networks, including like TLC, A&E, HGTV, what are some of the most memorable experiences, and what have you taken from being able to be on there?
Yeah, I mean, well, so one is it's amazing what you can do with a giant team of humans and some planning, So the thing to keep in mind with the TV shows is we don't show up and just figure it out when we get there. We have been planning that project for weeks, if not months. I know exactly what I'm doing. I know the profile of the family. I know the style of the house. I know all of that stuff. And I have already pre-selected the solutions. We know what we're talking about. There's no accidents when it comes to TV. So when you watch those TV shows and you get excited and you think, oh my gosh, like, how do I do that at my house? No, you can do it at your house, but you're probably not going to do it in the same amount of time we are, because we are a team of like between 20 and 50 people descending upon your house to create this massive change in a very short amount of time. So I always like people to understand what really goes on behind those shows, because it's not just me organizing, with a family for 4 hours in a day. It's like 20 people pushing hard for 4 days, to make it look like we did it in 2. And so really being full of grace for ourselves, being patient. But the truth is I loved working on those shows because it was so beautiful to watch the families have this transformation. I remember there was a family we worked with, and a lot of their clutter was paperwork. And I said to them, look, it's really hard to make time to organize paperwork. Paperwork takes the longest. It's like one of the slowest forms of clutter you can deal with. And so I said, look, it's going to be really hard. We're not going to be able to film you doing this, but if you are willing to, I'll give you the information to work on this at night. They did not sleep for like 2 days, and they stayed up and they cleared every single piece of their clutter. And the look on their face of relief when they were done, even though it was torturous and I wish that they hadn't, stayed up that long, it was so beautiful because I watched them kind of give birth to the next chapter of their life where they didn't have to feel suffocated by this clutter anymore. It was so beautiful.
So, with managing or being in charge of like 20, 30 people trying to do this, how do you maintain your vision, because not everyone can do it in your way,
No, you let go of that control really fast. There's been times where I will have I'll have a lot of anxiety on set sometimes because I know how I want it done and I can't necessarily make that happen. So it's like what we were talking about before we started recording, right? You have to stay flexible, be light on your feet, be willing to change. I'm someone who, generally speaking, doesn't come up with a big intellectual strategy when I'm working. I work very intuitively. So when I'm working on a space, and especially with a team of a large team like that, I am giving them their actions, but I'm watching for what goes wrong, because something is always going to go wrong or something's going to change, right? One family we were working with, in the middle of organizing all of their stuff outside in the backyard, there was a torrential rainstorm. And so that's a big pivot to try to figure out, well, how do I not destroy everything they own right now? And even with 20 people, we can't get the contents of their house back in. So strategizing really quickly, you just have to stay nimble, willing to be flexible on things, not, and I think too, a big part of it is my version of done is not your version of done. And my job as an organizer is not to ensure that you have my version of done. What I have to do is serve you. I have to serve your version of done. Whatever your version is what I'm here to create. And so getting out of my own way, stepping out of my own ego, out of my own desire, and really be of service to the people that I work with to give them what they're looking for.
That's really unique, and I don't know, it really made me think of things and just see how something simple as clutter can really be something a lot deeper. and a lot of people really may just let it pass, or don't even think about it.
Totally. Oh, most people, they just, one of the things that I say, I have this quiz that I have people take, and it's called Listen to the Monster in Your Closet, and it helps people see what monster is keeping them disorganized. There's 4 different ways that we keep ourselves stuck in the clutter. And one of the ways we keep ourselves stuck is by thinking that all clutter is the same. That the clutter on your counter is the same as the clutter under your sink, and the clutter in the backseat of your car, and the clutter in your junk drawer. And when we see clutter is all the same, we miss out on the lessons that it's here to teach us. And so what I help people do is to narrow their focus and start to look, okay, great. How do we see, okay, what's the clutter that's bugging you the most? The stuff that's on the kitchen counter. Great. What is that clutter? We're always looking at 2 things. Where's the clutter and what is the clutter? Meaning, what are the objects? Because once we know those 2 pieces of information, we can start to really understand what's happening with the clutter. And that's where the insight really starts to come alive.
I mean, from this, where do you see yourself trying to take this, or do you see yourself maybe having someone under you and maybe sort of trying to mentor them or anything like that?
Great question. So I've had that business model before, for sure. I'm in the current phase of education. I just want to give this information away all the time. I want to train other organizers in it. I want to help people read their own clutter, because as long as you need me, you're going to need me for the rest of your life. And there's only one me, and there's hundreds of thousands of people who have clutter issues. And so my job is to help educate people. So what I'm doing now is, I just came out with my new book, and I have a few new books that I'm going to be working on next. I've got an online organizing membership called the Chaos to Calm Community. I have online digital classes. My desire and job is to just share this information with as many people as possible, empower them to find their own voice within their clutter and to come home to themselves through the vehicle of organizing. And yeah, right now I'm just waving my flag, trying to get everybody on board and give them as much information as I can.
That's great. And then like you said, all those links, after, just share it with me and I'll put it in the notes so everyone can check it out. And
for sure. Oh, I was going to tell you too, I wanted to give your listeners a gift. I wanted to give them a free copy of my book. If they want it, they can go to starhansen.com/podcast, and they can get that link there. Or at the link there, they can also take the monster quiz so they can find out what monster is keeping them disorganized, and they can download a free copy of the book.
Yeah, great. That'd be amazing. So usually coming towards the end of the podcast, I usually have 3 questions, and the same 3 questions always is, say you're watching this video, 3 or 4 years from now, in the future, what do you want to say to your future self?
Thank you for trying so hard to make a positive impact in the world.
And then 2 truths and 1 lie.
Oh my gosh. Well, what's funny is I started a note about this because I feel like whenever this game gets played, I always panic. And some of mine are not appropriate. So, okay, let me think. Okay, so I've been featured on over 30 TV shows. I once was the poster child for an automotive gadget, and I was born in Topeka, Kansas.
Is the lie you were born in Kansas?
It is the lie. It is the lie. And I am proud of myself because I kept it clean. And that's not always easy for me, my friend. It's not always easy for me, especially with that game.
I understand.
Yeah.
and then I guess lastly, Star, if you could, is a quote, something that sort of resonated with you, or something that you came across recently that you could share and end on?
Yeah, absolutely. One of my favorite is a quote that is not a real quote. It's kind of a paraphrased quote that is attributed to Albert Einstein. And that is, we cannot solve a problem from the energy that caused it, meaning that in order to change a real root change of a problem, we have to shift our energy around it. And that's my desire with clutter, is if I can start to change how people view their clutter and how they view themselves through their clutter, then we can really change some profound life shifts that I would like for people to experience.
Mentally, spiritually, financially, consistently,